2025. Point 1 on the agenda is to note substitutes, and I have Councillor Whittaker for Councillor Belsey. And point 2, apologies for absence. I have Councillor Belsey and Councillor Hussain. In the absence of the chairman, I've been appointed chairman, and I would like to propose Councillor Henwood as vice chair for this meeting, if I have a seconder. Thank you. Point 3, to receive declarations of interest from members. Anybody?
No.
Don't see any. Point 4, to be agreed by general affirmation, the minutes of the previous scrutiny committee held on the 4th of March 2025. If you could respond verbally.
Agreed.
Thank you. Point 5, to consider any items the chairman agrees to take as urgent business. I have none. And we can now go to the main point 6, the Green Spaces Management Contract Review. And I would like to invite Simon Hughes to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to introduce this report in two ways. The customary way by giving you an introduction about the report, but then because it's about green spaces, I also wanted to show you visually some of the work that's been done. So I'll start by talking and then we'll move into a presentation. And the reason for that is I think that we all know our green spaces are an important asset for Mid Sussex. It defines the district and we know our communities really value them. But they're more than words. They are nature, they are places that people play, families meet and people enjoy. So we thought that was the best way to reflect them back and for you to then discuss this. The report provides a review of the Green Spaces contract, covering the period from January last year to December this year. It's part of a 10-year contract looking at enhancing the management and maintenance of our green spaces. And as we know, they're crucial for our community, our well-being, our environment, sustainability and biodiversity. So it's a complex management programme that covers a range of things that we want to achieve as a district. The report highlights key areas during the first year of the contract, which includes the mobilisation period, service integration and alignment with the sustainable economy strategy. Because as you know, at Mid Sussex, we have a set of strategies that informs our contracts and how we proceed with those contracts. And key to that is the sustainable economy strategy. The report also outlines future plans for community engagement, customer experience, the customer journey, innovation and environmental management. And the recommendations that are set out in section 3 of the report highlight how we are developing the contract and focusing on further development in terms of meeting the needs of our communities and our green spaces. So I can now move to the presentation. This is seamless, I hope. Brave, thank you. So what I wanted to illustrate here is just the scale of this contract and the work that is required around our green spaces. So we have over 400 green spaces. That's a lot of sports pitches that are used, sports pitches that can get flooded during winter and heavy rain and can be difficult to cut, and that dry out in the summer, and we have to manage that. Our contract has to manage that. We have 120 play areas. That's a considerable number that we need to maintain, renew, and sometimes redevelop. 30 hard courts, including tennis, which is played throughout the year. I see some nods around the table, and Mugas, so there's multi-use games areas. Interestingly, or perhaps not surprisingly, we have more requests to try and find the money for Mugas because they can be used throughout the year, and obviously the climate is having an impact on that. We have 36 sports pavilions, so that's a considerable estate that needs to be maintained and renewed and managed and is used by our communities. And then we have over 70,000 trees. And that's a considerable number. And when you think about an issue like ash dieback, that presents significant challenges to both this contract, the teams here that manage that, and our communities, because it's not a pleasant thing to see trees cut down, but that's what's required in order to prevent the spread of ash dieback. Thank you, Rob. So the scope of the contract is looking at developing the customer experience. So that's how people know what's going on, how they can find out what work is underway, how they can book courts and pitches. Innovation and commercialisation, and that's partly about how do people use our green spaces. That's not just our community, that's also our businesses. How do they use those spaces? They're an asset that we provide for our whole communities. I've already touched on sports bookings. Then we also have grounds maintenance. That's the standard work that's required. And again, big seasonal impact on there, which we've written about in the report. And then we have civils works, repairs and installations. So as we know, over the course of many years, decades, what people want, the kit that people want to play on changes. What people do changes. We didn't have park runs in the scale they are 20 years ago. They're a considerable user of our parks now. I know that some of you do go on those park runs. And then we have to do tree inspections and maintenance. And again, I touched on ash dieback earlier and the considerable amount of work we have to do in tree surveys to ensure the safety, but also that they are growing healthily. And then finally, clearance of watercourse screens as well. And that's obviously to ensure that we can tackle and mitigate flooding. So I'll pass you over to Rob now, who will talk in more detail about the service priorities in year one. Again, these are highlighted in the report. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Simon. I think as Simon alluded to, the previous contract was very much a traditional grounds maintenance contract. It was very much focused on grounds maintenance, and all the other services sort of happened outside of that contract through various different arrangements. And so one of the big focuses in year one has been around consolidation of a number of services that were provided in different ways in the past into a single arrangement. One of the other big things that we've done this year, and has been a big focus of our attention, is to move the services from an input-based to an output-based specification. So that's where we've essentially stopped specifying the frequency at which grass should be cut or sites should be litter picked, and instead have been really clear about the standards we expect to be achieved, because the contractor is best placed to make that decision around frequency. It puts the onus on the contractor to resource the contractor appropriately. So that was a big shift in the new contract, and something that we've been working on very closely with Glendale over the last year to get right, and it's paid dividends. I think, as I said, consolidating services, so rolling into what was a traditional green space ground maintenance contract, issues such as playground maintenance and inspection, tree inspection and management, and hard infrastructure maintenance, all of which were delivered through separate agreements in the past. And that obviously enables us to achieve synergies and efficiencies and provide a more joined up service to our customers and users. It also enables us to make better and easier evidence-based decisions around how we should, where we should focus our attention, and how we should invest in our open spaces. Going on to the commercialisation point, I think the contract and the way that it's designed enables us to leverage income opportunities for reinvestment into the estate, also, finally, and I'll get onto this in more detail in a minute, as Simon says, a big focus on sustainability and the objectives of the sustainable economy strategy. And we've been doing a lot of work with Glendale over the last 12 months to make sure that that's really embedded in the contract. Moving on into some more detail in some of that stuff around the integration of services, we've specifically integrated countryside management, which used to be carried out through a range of arrangements with farmers and smaller contractors, which enables us to more easily involve the community in the development and management of our estate, and also because of the scale of Glendale and their reach, enables us to bring in specialist technical support and advice much more readily than we were able to in the past. And then one of the big focuses of this year has been modernising our sports facility booking arrangements. We now have a system called Sports Key, which provides an online booking facility, enables clubs to access that themselves and self-serve, gives us much better data around who's using our facilities and for what purpose and so on, enables a much more seamless invoicing and billing arrangement, and effectively just provides, firstly, significant efficiencies for us, but also, and perhaps more importantly, a much better customer experience for our site users. And then finally, on that, we have integrated into the contract Sports Club Liaison. So the day-to-day interaction with sports clubs in terms of their requirements, requests for particular sites or particular pieces of work goes directly to Glendale. They've got a real handle on what's going on, where it's going on, what challenges there are, and they're able to obviously seamlessly then work with their maintenance teams to address those issues. So moving on to the sustainable economy strategy, as you said in the report, this was one of the first major contracts that was let by the council after we adopted our sustainable economy strategy, and so it's heavily focused on the delivery of our ambitions in that regard. I'm not going to talk you through these bullet points, but just to draw out a few specific examples. Biodiversity enhancement. So Glendale have been tasked within their contract with improving biodiversity in our open spaces. And they achieve that by implementing site-specific management plans. So they own that process. They are working directly with friends groups and site users to develop those plans. And they've also picked up the work that we did previously around the Blue campaign and rewilding to look at how we can rewild our open spaces and increase biodiversity and so on. There's also a big focus on sustainable practices, so emphasising sustainability and the use where there's a viable option of electric vehicles and equipment, minimising pesticide use, and obviously therefore minimising the environmental impact of our management of those sites. And then the other one that I want to draw out, which I'll touch on in a bit more detail shortly, is community engagement. So they actually lead and have a function around our community engagement in open space. So they're actually leading on things like creating opportunities for local people to engage with our open spaces, with the natural environment. They're also looking at a focus on the local supply chain. So making sure that we're using local suppliers wherever we can. So for example, things like a lot of our minor civils works and our play area works and so on are using local contractors and therefore employing locally. And they're also looking at providing work experience and apprenticeship opportunities and supporting us in our ambitions around that that are clearly set out in the SES2. So moving on to community engagement, just a couple of examples to bring this to life then. So one of the things that they committed to doing in the contract and that launched in March this year is the creation of a Green Spaces Action Team. So that initiative sort of aims to support people to get involved in low-level maintenance activities across our open spaces and to promote mental health and physical well-being. And we've had a number of successful events already, and we've got, as you can see there, a number scheduled for the coming weeks and months. Going forward, it's intended that these activities will be coordinated with Places Leisure, our leisure contractor, as part of their work to support people to engage in low-impact exercise and so on. So not only we're kind of trying to be much more joined up in our activities across our contracted services. And then onto the Healthy Walk scheme, all stuff that traditionally didn't sit within our grounds maintenance contract, that now sits very, very squarely within green spaces. So the Healthy Walk scheme, which is something that's now been running for 20 years, Glendale have picked that up, and they're currently sort of running a bit of a recruitment drive on walk leaders to support our aspirations to grow that programme further and ensure it's sustainable into the future. And as part of that work this year, they'll be doing some focused activity during Volunteers Week to promote the fact that our Healthy Walking scheme is now 20 years old. Finally from me, as explained in the report, we will start to move towards the proactive management and monitoring of key performance indicators in year 2 of the contract, and Simon will talk a bit more about that in a minute. We spent this year really sort of benchmarking and understanding performance and understanding what we want those performance indicators to look like from year 2 onwards. But what we do know from customer feedback is that the shift from an input-based to an output-based specification and the joining up of all those services so that it's much more holistic and provides a more seamless experience has really generated a huge amount of positive feedback from our site users and customers. And I think there were some quotes in the report, but there's just a few more up there. You know, I think it's fair to say that we weren't getting this volume of positive feedback under the previous contract, and we're really pleased with the amount of unsolicited praise we've had over the last 12 months. Simon.
Thank you, Rob. This is the final slide, so this is about the next phase in terms of the contract development. The nature of the contracts, as we've said and set out in the report, is that it develops over time. So we are partners. We use the data that we can now get from the contract in order to inform how that contract develops and how it continues to meet our needs and the needs of our communities. The next phases are to look at options for innovation to deliver efficiencies. So that can include understanding when bins need emptying rather than going on a regular going around everywhere, with some bins don't get as busy as others, and we know that from periods, seasonal periods, and according to how the parks are used in the summer. And that then means that the resources that Glendale have and we have can be used elsewhere if you use those resources more efficiently. Community development, as Rob's highlighted, we're continuing that programme. I think the examples of groups that that we jointly work with on nature reserves are an example of that. We are working with them and we're equipping them, and we've got some examples in the report of how we can also provide some grants to them so they can continue their work and get involved in the green spaces that are in their communities. Next week, we're doing work on the customer experience. So we have Glendale, we have our digital and customer services team, we have our contracts team, and we're doing the next phase of that, which will move information over so that people will be able to know what work is underway, when it's underway, and any queries and information will be readily supplied. We also have open book accounting so that we can see where the expenditure is, where money is spent, where income comes from, and adjust the contract accordingly. And then finally, one significant issue, and I know I've mentioned it earlier, but our approach to the management of ash dieback, which is a considerable challenge to our communities and the council, and we've done a lot of learning from our experience of that so far, and Glendale have brought learning from their experience of addressing that issue across the country in their other contracts. And that's something that we are going to need and are planning for over the course of this year and next year. And that is our introduction to the report. Many thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think, first of all, I would like to thank the officers for this extremely extensive report. And I think we can then open the floor to members for debate, please. Councillor Abel first.
Yeah. Just speaking from personal feedback that I've had from Cookfield Rec and Whiteman's Green in particular, that tends to back up what you've said about the better standards that we're getting than from before. I go there and check it myself. I was a coach there for many a year, and the grass is cut and the lines are straight. and stuff like that, you know, which is all quite important. And if it wasn't the case, I'd know about it, but actually the silence is a good thing, basically. So, but what in your report you mentioned about KPIs and this, that and the other. So that's my, you know, from just observation and feedback. But how do you manage, how are you controlling or managing the targets on the KPIs and that going, how is that done? Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I think well, what we've done in the first year is worked with Glendale to get a really good understanding of the standards that we want to achieve, and we've taken the first year to actually define what those KPIs should be. We've now got a schedule, and we're looking at the performance that we want to achieve against each of those KPIs, and we will start monitoring that imminently if we haven't done so already. I don't know whether Joe's able to confirm anything further on that, but basically we took the first year to kind of co-design those KPIs, so we weren't imposing something on the contractor. It was something we felt was achievable but challenging, and we will start monitoring them from now. But it will be all the sort of things you would expect. It's built around customer experience, it's built around standards of grounds maintenance, built around responsiveness and so on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rees.
Oh, okay. Have I done the right thing?
No, push it again.
And then it goes red, so just leave it.
Sorry.
Let's-
Thank you, Chair. I just have a few queries, really. So point 14, service priorities. You say that, and you repeated it just now, it's an output-based spec rather than a frequency. But how does that work in practice? How do you know how often Glendale go around? Because I have had some resident complaints that bins are overflowing and leaves are clogging up paths and that sort of thing. So, over to you.
Okay, so the way in which that's done is we have these standards that are required to be reached, and then we have a contract team as well that reviews and investigates what work has been done and ensures compliance. So we do that. The other bits that we've been looking at is customer feedback. So what customer feedback do we get about the performance of the contract? And then also what we do is we're monitoring, and that's why the data is so important, things like leaf fall, those sorts of things, seasonal impact, and therefore where we need to do more work in certain parts of the season than in others. Now what we've got over the course of this mobilisation, we've got a whole lot of data that tells us more about that, and we need to improve the monitoring of that. But that's how we assess that. I think the other challenge that we face, and I know to be honest, it's not just with this contract, we've faced it over the course of the whole green spaces, are seasonal things like hedge cutting. There are only certain times of the year that we can do hedge cutting, and often we'll get requests for us to cut hedges when we can't because of bird nesting and so on. So there's a balance that we need to strike, which is why we're doing the work around the customer experience and what information we can provide, which is informing people about green spaces and why we do certain things in certain ways, and also what standards they can expect, so what they can expect to see. And that's the work that we have been doing over the course of the last 3 to 4 months, and we'll be doing in anger in the next 6 months.
So on that basis, are you encouraging residents to feedback good and bad comments about green spaces to you or to Glendale directly?
Yeah, so thank you. At the moment, you can feed through to the Green Spaces email. We get a lot of contact through that through our website, and we'll be transferring that feedback through to Glendale so we can monitor how they respond to that feedback, and that's the work that we've referred to in terms of the customer experience. But all feedback is valuable. We want to get everything right. Sometimes we don't, sometimes the contractor doesn't. So the most important thing is that we address that and learn from that. And that's the nature of the contract. In the same way that we've learned with Glendale has spent time and our staff has spent time with sports clubs, so that we can link far more their use of the sports pitches with the maintenance of them, so they know that the pitch is ready before they play a game. And that's something we haven't been able to do before with the specification contract, where it just says cut the pitch at this particular X number of times. The most important time to cut that, and I think it's a good example, is prior to a game. You know, that's what makes it different to a football pitch, a rugby pitch, and so on. So that's the shift from that specification to that output based. But all feedback is important to us because that's our learning.
Okay, so you're going to be responsive. I note that you assume, quite understandably, that, for instance, litter bins will need emptying more in the summer. But through the winter, I've had lots of residents saying that the bins are overflowing in Clare Park, for instance, which is in my ward. So are you going to be responsible if they say, responsive, if they come and say, you know, they're feeding back to you that the bins are overflowing and that sort of thing? Are they going to increase the emptying of those?
Yes, certainly. That's certainly something we'll look at. We'll look at the sizing of bins, those sorts of things, when bins are used. Part of the innovation is actually a means by which we can monitor how full bins are, and therefore that work can be done more frequently.
Okay. I have a few more points, if I may, Chair. So when you talk about consolidating services, I wondered in what way, because you seem to talk about lots of different types of areas that would need different skills really to maintain them. So are you saying that Glendale covers the whole kit, as it were?
Chairman, thank you. So yes, that's absolutely right. They do. So we have, as I say, traditional grounds maintenance functions at with Glendale. We also have a community engagement function, so a team that are focused on that. We have sports pitch liaison and management, among others. And I think that consolidation, which is what Simon was talking about, when you look at something like sports pitches as an example, with it all sat within the one organisation, they are managing the liaison with the clubs, so they have direct feedback from the clubs around maintenance issues and so on, which they can then be more responsive to because they have the maintenance team within the organisation too. They also manage the booking system, so they have a proper sense of when pitches are required, but also there's an incentive there for them to maintain those pitches really well because they want to maximise the amount that we can use those pitches. So there's a kind of incentive there for them to work closely together across those different disciplines that are all under the one contractor now to ensure that the use of those pitches is optimised.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The next thing was about the ash dieback specifically. So are those areas, it's a simple question really, are you planning for there to be tree cover in those areas in future, whether that's ash trees or a different species? That's just, again, from feedback from residents saying that they feel it's quite bare, and I've explained that it's necessary for the moment, but I'm assuming that in the long term there's going to be some kind of tree cover again. Is that right?
Yes, I can certainly pick that up. It's really the right tree in the right space because the ash needs to be cut down, and then you need to look at what are the right trees to put in that space, or what's the right planting to be put in that space, both for biodiversity but also for the health of that area. So it will depend on that space. So I don't want to give you an answer that says yes, we'll replace every tree, because we won't. We'll look at what are the needs for that particular location.
Okay, thank you. And final question, you'll be relieved to know. The fund that you mention on point 29 that the council puts 5,000 to, and then Glendale put 20,000. Who decides how that's spent exactly?
So in terms of the administration of the fund, we're looking to work with some existing frameworks that we've got for the access to that money, and to facilitate community groups to make an application that we would then assess for support. To date, we've supported a friends group in one of our local nature reserves, and we've also supported the Lost Woods campaign to provide some community work within some of our green spaces. So it's something that we're definitely working on more over the course of the next year to bring attention to that. I think while we've upstood the operational requirements of our new contract.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. We can go to Councillor Peacock, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got some general comments on the process and then one or two specific questions, comments about the presentation report. When I look at the process, I would split it into two stages. The decision-making process, where a resident would contact perhaps the help desk and put a request in for trees or hedges to be cut on its council-owned land. And then the second half is the implementation, the customer service, customer interaction. I've been involved 3 or 4, how should we say, approaches from residents to the help desk since September or August. What I would say overall, they're very impressed with the delivery of Glendale. That's a big tick. They are very impressed. The quality of the work, tidying up, removal of equipment, the politeness and the competency of the contractors. They're very impressed, I have to say that. And they've asked me to pass that on here. When we look at stage 1, which is the decision-making process and the initial approach to the council, Colette, I found personally Colette has been very good. Don't want to mention specific names, but Colette on the help desk has been excellent. But when you actually look at the approach, we take on board, and this is for group learning because you learn through the stage, we take on board the large estate, we take on board perhaps the protracted switch over to new contractors, we take on also on board COVID, coming out of COVID, and how that complicated service delivery. What I would say, without going into specific details, for 2 specific resident approaches, for tree cutting and hedge cutting, they found it very, very difficult and long-winded and extended for the council to carry out those works. The first, one person approached in, I think it was 22, the other approached in 23, and they came to me as a last resort because they weren't getting anywhere. Either the help desk didn't get back to them, or they said the work wasn't going to go ahead, and in a few cases I came to yourself, Simon, to see what can be done. A number of those were successfully solved and they were very impressed with the delivery. What's my point? I think when you look through the actual learning opportunity, I think where the big gap is, we have to speed up the decision-making process and the responses, whether it's a yes or no, going back to our residents. And also I think, I don't know what the KPIs are, we haven't seen them, but I do think we need KPIs on how many days or weeks it's taken to issue a reply, a decision notice, and then give the reasons for that decision notice. And then once the decision notice has been issued, then give an indicative date when the work will be carried out. Because when we look at the ones I've dealt with, we take into account we need to take into nesting season. It's the winter. So most of these took 6 or 7 months to deal with, and they were dealt with in February. However, the residents weren't given an indicative work date. It was me trying to work with officers and Colette, who was very good in getting a date out of contractors and officers. So what I would say, the big learning out of this, we understand that perhaps because of the contract changeover was complex, we've had COVID, work was missed, it's happened. The work's then being carried out successfully to a high standard, but I do think going forward we need KPIs to say what's the minimum time and maximum time that a decision notice will be issued to residents, what's the logic for it, and then an indicative time on when the work will be carried out. Because there's 1 or 2 residents were very worried the work wouldn't be carried out because they hadn't been given an indicative date for the work. And there's still one resident who's still in the background wondering, is the work going to be carried out? Officers have said it will be, but because it impacts on their structure, their building, their roof line, they're worried it won't be. So overall, delivery is very good, but I think we need to sort out going forward KPIs on deadlines for decision notices and indicative dates when the work be carried out. Secondly, I do think that it's reasonable to assume that councillors will see an increase in approaches from residents to let us know work needs to be carried out in their opinion. I'm not criticising the rationale for what you're doing. If it's working, it's working. And I'm assuming it's going to take 6 months, a year for the contractors and the process to bed in place to monitor the bins, the grass. I assume that, but I do think there will be an increase in communications to councillors probably. And I think for now, they're my main comments. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peacock.
Thank you. That's very useful feedback. We understand that those are some of the issues that we're trying to resolve. So the reason we've talked about the customer experience is because that's exactly what we're working through. It's how to streamline the decision making and then information that's shared about when work's like to take place. The other bits that we want to include in there are the policies, so where we won't do work, even though people feel we might, or where there might be certain constraints, as you've rightly said, about who owns the land and what work we can do and what work we can't do. That process of streamlining the customer inquiry, but also sharing information about what works is underway, is the work that I was talking about we're doing from Monday onwards. Some of the issues that we've been resolving over the course of the last year are past contractual issues. So the mobilisation's only been this year. So the fact that those things happened previously are issues with the previous contracts. I know you understand because we talked about it. But it's that sort of feedback that's useful to us because you want to resolve that. Glendale want to resolve that. We want people to know what work we will and won't do and when it's likely to happen. That serves our communities well, it serves you well, it serves Glendale well because they schedule their work. And predominantly, we're getting that right, but we can certainly improve on it, and your feedback has been very helpful.
Can I
Thank
come
you.
back?
Did you want to come back?
Thank you, very briefly. Regards reviewing, updating the policies, certainly in terms of branches overhanging into residents' properties from district council owned land and trees. I think it was the 2012 policy that said the council would look at removing branches or pruning branches subject to the impact on amenity. I think it was taken out subsequently. Can we look, is that something you will look at reintroducing to give some discretionary decision to officers? Because there's one or two residents who have approached me. One, the council said they won't carry out those works because it's not in line with policy and they have other issues to focus on fundamentally.
I think I'm quite happy to pick up that particular issue with you. The policies serve across the whole district and are there reflecting the practice that we have to comply with both legally and in terms of the contract. So if there are specific issues, I'm quite happy to pick those up with you. One of the issues with discretion is it tends to then move to about when you're not applying it and then it becomes policy in its own right, and that's something we need to be cautious against because then that really impacts on our ability to manage budgets and also manage expectations.
Thank you. We can now go to Councillor Bates, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I picked up on point 5, the community spirit in the report. I thought that's a good idea. And I will probably engage with the officers over a number of issues I've got locally rather than carry on this evening. I am involved with a local group in Woodland, and we note that the Glendale have been quite effective in some of the work they've been doing. So I support Councillor Peacock, and I also note his KPIs issue. I think we all like to think something could be done and when. But anyway, the other things that I've just made a quick note of whilst speaking was the dog bin collection. I had to chase up one today, so it's near where I live, so I'll be checking on that one to see how regular it is. I mean, I have Victoria Park in my patch as well, and that's a continuous problem with dog bins and litter, etc. all the time, and hopefully we are on it. The other things that I would point out, I was very curious because I'm obviously got an interest in running, and when you mentioned the park run, I was curious to know what you were implying there, because we haven't got a park run really in Mid Sussex. We only got one by default after 20 years, but it's nothing to do with the district council. And when I'm on that park run, people just moan about Clare Park run. So the other ones don't really exist in Mid Sussex. So it's nothing like the one I know in Sweden, a 5 kilometre run, and we're never going to get anything like that in Britain. So I'm curious about that one. But also, when you mention park run, I'm glad that you have mentioned it, because actually park run now is embracing park walk. And people like me are getting to that standard. But it also would incorporate what is called prescriptive walking, not jolling around on a trot on what you're talking about, but that would help with that particular need as well. So follow that one up. I'll follow up the other points I've got with the officers in due course.
Thank you. I don't know who wants to take that up.
It was that park run I'm referring to, and I've done that park run, so I understand completely what you're saying about park runs.
Oh, you're nicking somebody else's.
But what I would do is I'd actually challenge you on, no, the council don't organise park runs, you're absolutely
That's
right.
right.
But park runs happen in the parks that we provide. And that's what we have to manage, and that's why we have to look at when we empty the bins, what we do about cleaning those parks and so on. So we're pretty key to making park runs happen, even though we don't organise them. But my point is, it's those uses of the park, and that changes over time. And therefore, what we do is we work with the communities to understand how they want to use them. And with this contract, it's flexible enough for us to manage that effectively for how the communities want to use those parks. That was the point I was making.
Thank you. Can we now go to Councillor Seidler, please?
Okay, thank you very much. I'd just like to actually repeat what a number of other councillors have done, to just say likewise in the parishes I go to, I'd just like to commend Glendale for the work they've been doing. I think the output and delivery has been recognised as being excellent. And as a particular example of what you were just talking about, Simon, I think the work that was done at Berrylands Pond in Sayers Common, where there was so much that the council could do, but then the residents wanted to do more. I think not only did Glendale work very effectively with the parish council and the district council to get the initial work done, but also worked extremely well to then allow the residents to continue to develop in an appropriate way. And I'd just like to commend everyone who is involved in that. I think it's a great example that should be recognised. I think going to this report, there's two things I'd say. One, fairly obviously, it's been mentioned a few times, and Rob, I fully understand about the development of KPIs. It is the right way to develop them rather than hold people to account, particularly if you're moving to output-based. But I would just say it's slightly disappointing to me that actually those draft KPIs aren't introduced here, because I feel that really to be able to be scrutinising a contract that's a year in with draft KPIs available, which we're not going to see for another year, sort of doesn't feel right. And it would be helpful, particularly since we know they're quite positive, to be able to contribute. So that would be my first point. The second goes to, and this is a bit of a clarification. I mean, I've had a number of communications separately on street cleaning and other issues, waste issues with the services team. And one that's just come up is dog waste bins, because they always do. I'd really like to be clear as to who is responsible for dog waste bins in parks, because that's clearly an issue in terms of capacity. And it seems to sit potentially between two contracts. And my understanding is it's Serco, and that's where that sits, but seems to be sort of being tipped into Glendale's bucket as well. I'd like to ensure that we can be very clear to residents on that. But with it, the other thing that I understand from Joe's recent emails, which, the old contracts that we've got with Serco don't have the technology to really allow visibility on the very points you were making about delivery. Which is very frustrating to residents. And I fully understand, as you point out, Simon, the right time to cut a playing field might be when the football match is due, but for the people that actually use it for not just playing football, they don't recognise that. And I really hope that as part of the innovation, there's going to be some visibility that allows councillors and residents when, exactly as Adam was suggesting, as Councillor Peacock was suggesting, when requests are put in, that they can be at least seen online, because it would help everyone. And it seems a fairly obvious thing that I would anticipate. I'm sure you've got on hand.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask Rob to pick up your comments on dog bins, if I may. On KPIs, we do have performance indicators. KPIs, as you rightly said, are very different, and certainly an output-based contract. And we're more than happy to bring back the ones that we've developed, and will develop over the course of the next 3 months to this committee. That's, that it's important that you have visibility of those. On the innovation, you're exactly right on two fronts. One is about our ability to monitor how full bins are, and that's some work that we're doing with Glendale. And the other is Glendale already have a portal that will show what work is due and when it's due. And part of the work we've been doing with the digital team is to integrate that with our system. So we're looking to do that and plan for that. Again, that's in our meeting on Monday, and we'll have better visibility of when that will roll out. And part of the challenge, to be quite frank, there is about integration of systems and so on.
Okay.
Chairman, thank you. Yeah, so just to be absolutely clear, dog bins sit squarely with Serco. So the question around responsibility for bins is more difficult on litter bins, because street litter bins sit with Serco, and litter bins in our parks sit with Glendale, but dog bins all sit with Serco.
Thank you. We have Councillor Edwards here. I think we might have jumped. Did you want?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, please.
Do I have to press this again?
No,
Oh, that's it. Did you get ahead of me in the queue? I thought I was saying.
down.
Oh, okay. I'm so confused. Sorry. Okay, fine. Oh, thank you. I did have a number of questions, but they've been addressed already. Thank you, from other councillors. So, but I think I've still got two left. So one is just on the ash dieback. I thought that was quite an interesting paragraph about letting nature take its course and things, and the council originally anticipating significant costs, but those have been, to some degree, been mitigated. Is there any more kind of detail? Is it a bit like with COVID, where it seems as now we've maybe people got a few things wrong at the beginning and did things they shouldn't? Is it a bit possibly like that with ash dieback? We don't need to cut down every tree straight away. Is that the kind of adjustment that's being looked at?
Please.
Chairman, thank you. Yes, so effectively, we've learned some lessons from our first foray into ash dieback management, where we took the approach that we would take out everything that was risky, and what we're now looking at is a more risk-based approach. So certainly, one of the sites that we've been looking at recently is East Court and Ash Platts up in East Grinstead. There's quite a lot of ash in there, but there are areas that are very, very lightly trafficked by people, and there are areas where we can control access by people on foot. So what we're doing is removing ash where there are very obvious risks to passers-by, where that ash is in a sort of quite advanced state of decline. Where it's not, when we can fence areas off or warn people out away from areas through signage and so on, we're looking to do that instead. Okay. So it's a more sort of nuanced approach.
Very good, thank you very much. And then my other one was just, I noticed one of the goals here was minimising the use of pesticides. And obviously there's no particular details on that, but I wondered whether herbicides were also something that had been addressed, specifically glyphosate I was asked about.
Thank you. So we don't actually use glyphosate on the contract. Yes, we do have minimal chemical use, which we're seeking to reduce over time, but we're not using glyphosate.
Okay, that's simple, and thank you. And I'll just say, I've also had a refreshing drop in the number of complaints since the glory of Glendale riding in to sort of rescue us all, so thank you.
Thank you. We can now go to Councillor Hitchcock.
Thank you, Chair. This is just a praise for Serco. Before I became a councillor here, and I was a parish councillor in Worth, we had a terrible problem with poo bin. And the problem was that Worth Parish Council didn't know how many they got, and neither did Serco. So my wife and I did a count, being poo bin specialists and dog walkers. And we found out that Serco were not collecting from 5 bins at all. And that was because they didn't know they existed. So we did a map. It came down to you, I think, Rob. And we've not had a poo bin issue per se for the last 4 years. And that's just a little bit of work. It took a couple of days to do it. And it's something that perhaps if you're getting a lot of comments in your area, you should just go and check what you've got, because people don't know what you've got, okay? And if they know what you've got, they collect it. Thank you.
Okay. I've got a question.
We'll go to Councillor Henwood.
Thank you. So I'm to understand that we'll probably see the KPIs within 3 months for Glendale.
We'll ensure we schedule that for a suitable scrutiny committee.
I beg your pardon.
We'll schedule that for a suitable scrutiny committee. We'll do
Thank
the
you
work.
very much. Now, I'm a bit confused. Item number 12. No, I don't know number 12. No, number 24, when we talk about policy context. So I'm a bit confused because several questions. Have we got a leisure policy? Have we got a green spaces, or is that included within a leisure policy, or are they both together? We are looking forward to an assessment of all our play spaces, our play parks. Does that fall into green spaces or leisure? Because Glendale are responsible for play area inspections and maintenance. So I really wonder, where does this all come together? And what policies do we actually have?
Thank you, Chairman. We brought to, I think, this scrutiny committee a couple of years ago our strategic vision for green spaces, which is the document that kind of gave rise to the investment programme in our parks through the Parks Master Planning process,
Okay.
and is also where the proposal around the review of our play areas came from. That doesn't sit with Glendale. That's something that is being managed separately through council officers, because it's a bit more of a strategic piece of work.
Okay.
But that sits within the Green Spaces Strategic Vision, which is a report that came to this committee and so is available on our website.
Greens, thank you very much. What about some sort of leisure policy? We used to have one.
We don't currently have a leisure policy.
Could I ask, perhaps, is it envisaged that there will be, or is it no longer, is it redundant?
We are developing a leisure strategy. That's work that's underway.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have we got one more? Councillor Whittaker.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Sorry, the machine's not working. I'm trying to race, but I'm being blank. Thank you for being a guest on your esteemed scrutiny committee. First of all, thank you to the officers for the opportunity to bring this really important subject to scrutiny. I think this is proper scrutiny committee and it's a really good subject. So thank you for the report. Just a couple of comments. From me, from other people who I've been liaising with in preparation for tonight. Bob Shelley, who's the independent chair of our East Grinstead Sports Council, does a tremendous amount of work. He's been really pleased with the Glendale feedback and contact. certainly taken over. So I'll just read out a few comments from him, really, because he's in there. So he's got a series of detailed meetings with all of the local sports clubs to discuss this, because I briefed him on it and said obviously we're doing a review, but he just gave me a few general points. Glendale have been on a long learning curve in trying to familiarise themselves with the MSDC estate. Contract provides, but it's taking a while to achieve. They have been keen to engage from the start and valued the way we have been able to unite the clubs in relating to them. This has been a difficult first season for them because the awful weather has meant a substantial backlog of fixtures at the end of the season. It has also meant much of the pitch improvement strategies have not been possible yet. They have introduced a number of new initiatives for booking pitches, reporting problems and paying for usage. Unfortunately, the club representatives still see the Glendale first point of contact as less than responsive than he could be in his role, although the contracts manager, Phil Coxall, has been excellent to deal with, is very responsive and has a sports pitch background. Secondly, I'm subbing tonight for Councillor John Belsey. Just a couple of comments from him specifically, which you'll probably be aware of, but I'll raise them as he's made me aware of them. I know the feedback from some of my group has been very positive. From lots of councillors. However, this has not been the case for Councillor John Belsey's own parish of Ashurst Wood, or the parish council or the village football club in particular. There has been considerable frustration re not knowing who to contact in the event of questions. Will this transfer from MSDC to Glendale, and what are the expected response times, given requests are often in respect of upcoming matches, etc. I know it would be also helpful if scheduled works could be published and stuck to. Finally, Councillor Belsey understands that there is some frustration across the district regarding tennis courts, and that's obviously his pet sport, as you will know. Those in Ashurst would have been unplayable all winter, and I understand that other courts have also been suffering. At my last village council meeting, it was mentioned that the contractors from Glendale said to the clerk that they didn't know how to manage tennis courts and didn't realise initially that they were in the contract. Please, can we therefore specifically request that we proactively manage the tennis courts when autumn approaches and the leaves moss start appearing on the courts? Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman, thank you. I think just picking up on the point around customer contact, I think it's kind of what Simon said. We've been in a period of transition over the last 12 months. It has been a bit bumpy at times, but we are now picking up with some energy that whole piece around transferring the customer experience across to Glendale Wholesale. But it's been a bit patchy over the last 12 months, and that's going to be a really keen focus over the next 12. And that will provide a much more seamless approach for our customers, for our parish councils and so on. Tennis courts are very much in the contract. They're very much specified in the contract. Glendale knew that they were in the contract and are very well equipped to manage tennis courts. If there are specific issues, and I know we've liaised directly with Councillor Belsey and the Village Council on the specific issues in Ashurst Wood, which are unique to those courts because of where it is and because of the tree cover and so on, we will deal with those, and Glendale will be responsive in going out to deal with them. But some of those issues are just as a consequence of where courts are and some of the specific issues that they present. But I think just to reassure you, they absolutely know what they're doing in terms of tennis courts, and they will continue to maintain them to a high standard. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henry.
Having introduced tennis courts, I have to compliment Glendale because within 2 weeks of their getting the contract, they cut back all the brambles in St. John's Park tennis courts and really made it nice. So that's to compliment, and I actually sent an email to compliment them. Positive note.
I'm sure we could do that.
Thank you. We'll pass that on to Glendale and our team. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I have any questions I might have had. I think have already been answered So if there is no further questions, we can go to the vote, please. If you can vote on your touch screen on the recommendations as listed on page 7. Is that everybody?
Just pop it up on the screen. It'll come up in a minute. There we go, Christian. Christian. Screen.
Thank you. That's 10 for, none against, and no abstentions, so the vote is carried. Thank you very much. Point 7, questions pursuant to the Council Procedure Rule 10.2. Due notice of which has been given, there are none. So I can declare the meeting closed at 8:01, please. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Christian.